So why don't we get started? We're starting a whole new story today. We're starting the story of, well, I don't know, the story of what? We'll read the first verse. We'll start with the first verse, which we also, I think we read at the very end of last week, but we'll start again with this verse and then get a sense of where we are. Okay, so we're in chapter 13, verse 1. So first of all, what did we do until now? We had the whole story of David and Bathsheba and all the consequences, the Nathan, the prophet, warning him and telling him what his punishment would be. And the first punishment was that his son would die. And indeed, that firstborn son that was born out of the relationship, the illicit relationship between David and Bathsheba, he died. That baby died. And then there was a second child born, and that is Solomon. Then we go back at the very end of the chapter 12, we go back to the war. And we talked about the fact that this whole story of David and Bathsheba, there are bookends, which is the war. Because the war itself, it's in the middle of this war, and it's the war itself which enables this whole story to happen, because, of course, Uriah is out fighting, and then he sends him back to fight. So the fact that then we close again with the war is just giving the context and closing that whole story. What we're starting now in chapter 13 is ostensibly a completely different story. In fact, we're going to meet a whole new cast of characters. So let's just read the first verse. This happened sometime afterward. Absalom, son of David, had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and Amnon, son of David, became infatuated with her. Okay, so first of all, we have two children of David, two children of David, and ostensibly three children of David. We'll get to that in a minute. We know that Absalom is a son of David, and Amnon is a son of David. Okay, and Absalom has a sister whose name is Tamar. What we don't know is whether Tamar is also a daughter of David. That we don't know, and this is something that we will discuss as we turn the story around. But what's very interesting is we're introduced here to a brand new character, three new characters, Absalom, Tamar, and Amnon. But the way this is worded, the main person here is Absalom. It's starting with Absalom, has a sister, and Amnon, son of David, and because Absalom and Amnon are both son of David, we know that they're brothers, okay? So Absalom seems to be the pivotal character. He's the one who's connected both to Amnon and to Tamar. But it's very interesting because we've never met Absalom before. We have no idea who he is. And so the story begins with a story about Absalom. Now, as we go into the story, we will see that Absalom is not a major character in this story, at least at the beginning. Absalom is being used here to introduce two very important characters in the story, Amnon and Tamar. But so you may ask, well, why do we need to know about Absalom at this point? Why are we introducing him? If Absalom had been featured in this chapter before, or a few chapters before, and this now would continue with more about Absalom, well, by the way, Absalom had a brother and a sister, then you would say, okay, that makes sense. But we're introduced to Absalom for the first time, and then the story isn't really about Absalom. He features in the second part of the story, but at the beginning of the story, he has nothing to do with the story, okay? He's not there at all. So that raises a question. What we're actually about to embark on now is a series of stories that begin here and go to almost to the end of 2 Samuel. And these are stories that essentially, for the most part, rotate around Absalom. The ultimate in the story is Absalom, who rebels against David. He leads a massive rebellion against David, like a real rebellion. David is thrown off the throne, and exiled from Jerusalem. It is a very serious military and political rebellion where David is ousted and then afterwards returns, all instigated by Absalom. And so basically what we're seeing here, and I think this is why chapter 13 begins with Absalom, even though this particular story, Absalom does not feature prominently, all of this is going to be extremely related to everything about Absalom. Okay, starting here, we're going to be building bit by bit a story that will all rotate eventually around Absalom and what he and his relationship with David and how he behaves and what he does, which will be very, very critical in everything that happens from now on. Now, it's no coincidence that this story is written right after the story of the whole, saga, I would say, about David and Bathsheba, because there's a direct relationship. If you'll remember that Nathan said to him that he will be punished. And there's a few things here that I want to point out and remind you from chapter 12 that we will see echoed as we read in chapter 13. So first of all, if you'll recall, in chapter 12, when Nathan comes to David, he actually spins a whole story about a man who has this one little lamb and the rich man who has lots of sheep, and he takes away the lamb from the poor man. And he comes to David as if this is a real case, and David judges the case. And this is David's judgment about the case. He says, "As the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die." Okay. "And he shall pay for the lamb 4 times over." So that is his judgment. Number one, the man who did this should die. And number two, he has to pay quadruple. Okay. 4 times. He has to make some kind of a payment 4 times. That's restitution in a way for what the poor man suffered. And then Nathan says to David, "You are the man." Okay. The next thing is when Nathan actually tells him what his punishment is, he will say, "I will make a calamity rise against you from within your own house. I will take your wives and give them to another man before your very eyes, and he shall sleep with your wives under this very sun. You acted in secret, but I will make this happen in the sight of all Israel." And then he also talks about the fact that this child is going to die. So the fact that this child about to be born is going to die, we've already seen this. Okay, these other issues need to be kept in mind because they are going to be very much reflected in the series of stories we're going to start reading now and continue with Absalom. So these are things we want to keep in mind. Okay, so now we're going to go into the story, and we've introduced the cast of characters. The main characters are Amnon and Tamar. Okay, Amnon. So what did we learn in this verse? First, Amnon, son of David, became infatuated with her. Now we know that Tamar is Absalom's sister. We know that Amnon is Absalom's brother. We know that Absalom and Amnon are both sons of David. The question is Tamar and Amnon, are they brothers and sisters? And this is a bit ambiguous here. Here, it doesn't tell us, okay? But on the other hand, it's a troubling situation that a fellow would become infatuated with his sister, even if it's his half-sister. It's definitely not more than a half-sister. Let me just reference this to you so we see exactly who we're talking about. If you look at First Chronicles, here we always, the genealogies here in First Chronicles, very often, if you're just reading it straight, you're going to go, "Oh, this is so boring. I'm gonna skip it." But what's very, very important about these genealogies is that it helps fill in very important information for us in some of the other stories that we are reading. So if we look at, as I said again, First Chronicles chapter 3, verse 2. Okay, so first we learn here, the chapter begins with the various sons of David. And we learned here the third, Absalom, son of Maachah, daughter of King Talmai of Geshur. Okay, so we learn here that this was we know already, we learned about 2 different wives. We learned about Achinoam. We learned about Abigail. We also learned about Michal. These are wives of David. Now we learn about another wife that we didn't know about, Maachah. She's a princess. She's not of Israelite descent. Her father is King Talmai of Geshur. Geshur is a small little kingdom located in the Lebanon area. Okay, so that's who Absalom is. Now, so we know that Absalom and Tamar are brother and sister. So we can assume that, and it doesn't say that Amnon and Tamar are brother and sister. So the assumption is that Tamar is also the daughter of the same Ma'acha. Okay, daughter of, and so that's what brings them together. Now the question is Tamar also the daughter of David? Okay, and this is a question mark, because if she's the daughter of David, then Amnon is dealing with his sister, even if it's half sister. It's a big no-no. If David is not her father, then there is no biological connection between Amnon and Tamar. They are step siblings, which means they're growing up in the same household, because the mother of one is married to the father of the other, but they're not actually sister and brother in that biological sense. And one of the things that strengthens this idea that maybe they're just step and not full brother and sister is what's written in verse 9. In the summary of this whole list of children from the various mothers, in verse 9 it says, all were David's sons, besides the sons of the concubines, and Tamar was their sister. Okay, so Tamar stands out. She's different. She's not, all were sons of David, except for the sons of the concubines, and Tamar was their sister. Tamar was their sister, but it could be that her exception here is the fact that she is not a daughter of David. It's very possible that David married Ma'acha, that she had been married before, and she had a daughter. And so she brought her into this marriage. That is just something I'm putting before you, because this is a very troubling story. The story of Amnon and Tamar is the story of a rape, but it could be much worse if it were also the story of incest. And I'll also point out as we go along why it's possible it's not incest in the technical sense, as you'll see how the story moves on. But again, this is a question that I'm throwing at you. Okay, verse 2. Amnon was so distraught because of his sister or half sister. The actual, what it says is sister. It could be half sister, it could be stepsister, but it says sister. Okay, Tamar, that he became sick, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. Okay, so here we have an interesting thing. It doesn't say that he doesn't see any way he can have relations with her because she's his sister. It says he doesn't see a way out of this because she's a virgin. Okay, so this is a little bit odd. Okay, Amnon had a friend named Yonadav, the son of David's brother Shema. So that means Yonadav is actually not just a friend of Amnon, but he's his first cousin. He's Amnon's first cousin, and he's Absalom's first cousin. Okay, Yonadav was a very clever man. He asked him, in other words, Amnon now goes to Yonadav and asks his advice. Oh no, first Yonadav goes to Amnon and says, why are you so dejected, O prince, morning after morning? Tell me. Amnon replied, I am in love with Tamar. Now, one second. I'm in love with Tamar, the sister of my brother Absalom. Now, again, this raises the question. If it was his sister, he wouldn't say the sister of my brother Absalom. He would say my sister. Okay, so this is the kind of things that create an impression that maybe, after all, she's a stepsister and not a half-sister. But okay, anyway, and also we learned that Yonadav is a wise man. That's what it says, scripture says. So we'll see Yonadav's suggestion. It would be hard for the scripture to say someone was a wise man if you were going to suggest any kind of relationship, consensual or otherwise, between a brother and a sister. Okay, but anyway, Yonadav said to him, lie down in your bed and pretend you are sick. When your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in front of me so that I may look on, and let her serve it to me. Now, the question is, what does Yonadav have in mind here? If we believe that Yonadav is a positive character And I don't think that there's anything in the story that indicates that he's a very problematic character. It's very possible that what he's doing is setting a situation where Amnon and Tamar can talk, or Amnon and Tamar can get to know each other, and maybe that will enable something to go forward. Again, if this was a sister-brother relationship, would Yonadav had set it up so that they have this intimacy or this potential intimacy? It's also very probable, but again, everyone needs to judge this as we continue reading the story, that Yonadav had no idea that Amnon had evil intentions here. All he said is, I'm in love with her, and I don't know what to do. Now, when you say you're in love with her, and actually the word used here is ohev, is the word for love. It's not the word for lust or desire. It's a word for love. Now, is it really love? That's something else. But this is what he's telling his friend Yonadav. Okay. And also it's very interesting. Let her prepare the food in front of me. The idea being this will give them a chance to spend time with one another. It's not just she's going to bring in a tray, put it down, and leave. By having it that she'll prepare the food in front of him, that creates more time together. Okay. So he does what he suggested. Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. The king came to see him, and Amnon said to the king, let my sister Tamar come and prepare a couple of cakes in front of me, and let her bring them to me. David sent a message to Tamar in the palace, please go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him. Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was in bed. She took dough and kneaded it into cakes in front of him and cooked the cakes. Now, by this, very interesting, there's a word that is used here for food that really doesn't usually mean food. A word in Hebrew is birya, and this word can sometimes refer to oil. So you'll see here she's not making cakes is really the wrong, it's more like pancakes. She's frying pancakes. And so some people say the word birya is often used in context of cooking with oil. So it could be that that's what it means. But there's another interesting explanation. Birya can also be from the root of bari, which means healthy. In other words, it could be it's a particular type of food, not necessarily specific food, but the kind of food that you would bring to someone who is not well, and giving them this kind of food would make them feel better, or whatever. So I just wanted to point that out in the Hebrew. Okay. She took the pan and set out the cakes, but Amnon refused to eat and ordered everyone to withdraw. He sent everybody out of the room except Tamar. After everyone had withdrawn, Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food inside and feed me. Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them to her brother inside. Now, what's the inside and the outside? You can assume, let's assume a 2-room apartment, okay, type thing. So the front room is more, there's a kitchen, there's a dining room table. This is the place where she's preparing the food. And he's in an inner room in the bed. Okay. So she's out there preparing the stuff. And he says, no, come into where I am. Come to my room. But when she served them to him, he caught hold of her and said to her, come lie with me, sister. Okay. Now this is a very, very problematic thing. First of all, is she really his half-sister? If she is also David's, if she is David's daughter, then this is 100% incest, okay? If she is not David's daughter, the very fact, it makes sense, by the way, if you have the same children in a household. And we see this today very often when we have, Brady Bunch kind of situations, his and hers and mine and ours and all that. If you have children growing up in the same household, this one is from this mother and a previous husband, and one is from this father and a previous wife, and they're all growing up together, they will often, it makes sense that they will refer to each other as brothers and sisters because they're growing up in the same household. So it makes a lot of sense, even if she's just a stepsister, that she keeps being referred to as a sister. And then when he talks to David, he also refers to her as a sister because if anything, he wants to create a situation that his sister is coming to care for him. There's nothing problematic in this. It's normal for your sister, your stepsister, anyone, someone who's in the household to come and help you out when you're not feeling well. But if he goes to her now and says, lie with me, sister, it's like whether or not she's a sister or a stepsister, okay, it is creating a situation of near incest, even if it's not technically incest. In other words, you get the sense with him that he's getting particularly turned on by the forbidden nature of everything he's about to do. He's going to rape her, and he's going to rape somebody that he sees as his sister. So, he himself, in his mind, he is just horrific. He is setting this up in a very, very bad way. And he's revealing himself and his intentions and his, I don't know, sick mind, I guess, by how he's speaking. Okay, verse 12. But she said to him, don't, brother, don't force me. Again, she calls him now brother, as almost to say, what are you doing? Your brother, I'm sister. This is really not in the cards. Don't force me. Such things are not done in Israel. Don't do such a vile thing. Where will I carry my shame? And you will be like any of the scoundrels in Israel. And now listen to this. Please speak to the king. He will not refuse me to you. This is probably the most important indication that they are not really brother and sister. Because if she's saying David will approve of this relationship, just do it right, she's saying. Don't rape me. Don't force me. Do it right. Ask David. He won't refuse you. It has to be, at least the way I see it. And much of this that I'm teaching today is based on a class that I myself learned in, with one of my favorite Bible teachers. And basically where you see this, there's no way that there would even been a hint that it would be okay if they were biological sisters and sister and brother. So this is, again, another thing that kind of reinforces the fact that, no, they were only step brother and sister. But he would not listen to her. He overpowered her and lay with her by force. Okay. Terrible, terrible. Then Amnon felt a great loathing for her. Indeed, his loathing for her was greater than the passion he had felt for her. Now, it's very interesting. Here, the same word, ahava, that we translated earlier as love, here, my English translation translates as passion. But I think it really is love, because I think what's happening, they're using love in a very ironic sense here. Okay? He cries to his friend Yonadav, I'm in love. But then when we see how he treats her, he had lust for her. He used her and he threw her away. And as soon as he finishes work, he despises her. So I think the fact that scripture, he uses the word love, it is almost as if to mock him. This is what you call love. When he says, oh my, the scripture says his despising her was greater than his love for her. Well, with all due respect, this is not love. This was never love. It's an ironic use of the word love. And Amnon said to her, get out. She pleaded with him, please don't commit this wrong. To send me away would be even worse than the first wrong you committed against me. And this is something that's very important to understand. In ancient times, a woman who was raped, and we talked about this with what David did to Abigail, it doesn't matter that she was forced and it was against her will. She's damaged goods. She has no chance of having a marriage. No one will marry her. She will be damaged goods. And thank God this is not our attitude anymore. But this was what life was like in ancient times. And it's not something that should have been, but it is what was. Okay. And so she, even though she has now been raped but in such a horrible way, she prefers to stay with him because at least she will have some dignity. She will be married. She will have children, perhaps. If he throws her out, she has no future. And that is why she begs him. She says, don't throw me out. And he says that would be even worse, because it's bad enough you rape me, but if you also throw me out, then I have no future. And she's right. But he would not listen to her. He summoned his young attendant and said, get that woman out of my presence and bar the door behind her. She was wearing an ornamented tunic, or actually, I don't know why they say ornamented. The word here is the same exact word that is used for the robe that Jacob gave to Joseph, which is a striped robe, okay? Or people call coat of many colors or whatever. It doesn't say anything about colors, but it is striped. Okay, so here it says ornamented. I don't think it's really ornamented. The idea being it's a very special, it's a very regal outfit. And it says here it's for maiden princesses were customarily just dressed in such garments. In other words, she came into him dressed like a princess who was a virgin. Okay. And he sends her out with this garment. How she came in, she goes out with this garment. But what happened? She's no longer a virgin. His attendant took her outside and barred the door after her. So basically, he just threw her out. Tamar put dust on her head and rent the striped tunic she was wearing. She put her hands on her head. Now, why did she rip it? Because she's no longer a virgin. It's a tragedy. And it's wearing this particular outfit that it is a very beautiful thing that marks her in such a respectful way. This is a princess who is a virgin. All of a sudden, that has been ripped from her. Also, why is she a princess? Because she's part of the house of David. So it's being part of the house of David, whether she's a stepsister or a sister, which has made this vile act so horrible. So in ripping this robe, she is ripping it because he took away her virginity in such a horrible way. And he took away her whole status as a princess of the house of David. What does it mean? What has he done to her? And she walked away screaming loudly as she went. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Was it your brother Amnon who did this to you? For the present, sister, keep quiet about it. He is your brother. Don't brood over the matter." So he's trying to protect her. He says, don't tell people about this because this could be, let's keep it quiet, basically, is what he's saying, in order to protect her. And Tamar remained in her brother Absalom's house forlorn. So he brings her into his house where he protects her, and she's just in despair, and she's terrible. And it's actually, the word in Hebrew is much, much more. It's more than forlorn. It says, and Tamar sat in desolation. And it's very interesting because the word shmama that's the word shmama in Hebrew. It means desolate or desolation, desolate in the sense of empty and barren and nothing. And it's so interesting that also in English, desolate and desolation are connected, and that uses that word desolate in the context of desolation. And it's much more than forlorn. It's empty. It's ripped of everything good and beautiful. It's a very powerful word. When King David heard about all of this, he was greatly upset. Absalom didn't utter a word to Amnon, good or bad, but Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. So here we have Absalom. We were introduced to Absalom at the very beginning. We had no idea who he was or what his connection was. But as I said, he's going to end up being a major character from now on. So this is where he first becomes active. He's protecting his sister. And we'll remember, Absalom and Tamar have the same mother. They are both children of Ma'achah, who's the princess of Geshur. Okay. 2 years later, when Absalom was having his flock sheared at Baal Hatzor near Ephraim, Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, "Your servant is having his flock sheared. Would your majesty and your retinue accompany your servant?" But the king answered Absalom, "No, my son, we must not all come, or we'll be a burden to you." He urged him, but he would not go, and he said goodbye to him. Thereupon Absalom said, "In that case, let my brother Amnon come with us." To which the king replied, "He shall not go with you." But Absalom urged him, and he sent with him Amnon and all the other princes. So basically, Amnon is creating a situation. He has not spoken or seen his brother Amnon for 2 years. And he's holding this anger against Amnon all that time. And so he decides time has come, and he's about to do a shearing. Shearing is usually it's a hard work, but afterwards a very festive occasion. We remember when David meets Abigail is also in the context of the shearing, and then the festivities after the shearing, and everything that happens with Nabal is in that context. And so here too, we know it's hard work, but then there's a great celebration afterwards. And Absalom invites the king and all of the brothers. And it says here in English, the retinue, but it's wrong. It's not his retinue. It says very specifically in the Hebrew, his sons, all the sons. Okay, invites all the sons. And he says, and the king doesn't want it. He says, it's no question. He does not want to put Absalom and Amnon next to each other. But Absalom is very, very persistent. So in the end, they all go. Okay. All the brothers. So he agreed to send Amnon, but with the other brothers. And I can assume that what he's thinking is, okay, nothing's going to happen if all the other brothers are there at the same time and they're all together. Okay. Let me just read what happened. We'll be finished and we'll take it up the rest up. Okay. Now Absalom gave his attendants these orders. Watch, and when Amnon is merry with wine, and I tell you to strike down Amnon, kill him. Don't be afraid, for it is I who give you the order. Act with a determination like brave men. Absalom's attendants did to Amnon as Absalom had ordered, whereupon all the other princes mounted their mules and fled. They were still on the road when a rumor reached David that Absalom had killed all the princes and that not one of them had survived. At this, David rent his garment and lay down on the ground, and all his courtiers stood by with their clothes rent. But Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shim'ah, said, my lord must not think that all the young princes have been killed. Only Amnon is dead, for this has been decided by Absalom ever since his sister Tamar was violated. Jonadab knows that Absalom has never forgiven or forgotten what Amnon did to Tamar, and he bided his time to wait for the opportunity. So my lord the king must not think for a moment that all the princes are dead. Amnon alone is dead. Okay, I think we have to stop here because it's getting late. We will take up next time with the end of the story. We'll start with verse 34. And as I say, the story is here. It continues on and on and on with all kinds of new stories and all kinds of developments. But we can certainly end here. We could see what we are in the middle of is we started with a terrible rape and violation between stepsisters or stepsister and brother or real sister and brother. I think it's most logical to do step, but that's totally up to you. We move now to murder. Okay, that Absalom has now murdered his brother. And what goes on. What we are going to see, if you remember we mentioned it before last week when we talked about some of the punishments that Nathan is telling to David, that a lot of this will be played out as part of the rebellion of Absalom against David. But I read something that was really nice, that very interesting. When David responded to that example and gave his ruling, he said he will pay four times over. He will pay, times four, quadruple, okay, the sheep. And what we're going to see here is that David actually is punished with 4 different punishments, okay? And so we're going to see what's happening now. Okay, we only know his first son was killed, the baby. Now another son was killed, Amnon, okay? And the story progresses. All right, anyway, we will not be meeting next week because next Wednesday evening is Rosh Hashanah, so we will not be meeting. We will be meeting in 2 weeks. Okay, so I will see you again in 2 weeks. Any comments? Questions, whatever. No, everybody's so smart today. Great. Okay, anyway, great to see you. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.